I talk about the Bite Me Edibles Journal on the show and in the edibles tracking episode that I just did. And that's the physical book that you can get on Amazon. And if you're like me, I love a physical book. But I also have a free digital tracker that you can download right now. It's 5 entries, it's a fillable PDF, and it's completely free, and it's a good way to start the habit before you commit to anything. You can find the link in the show notes, and if you want the full version, 40 consumption entries plus 20 batch log pages, also a fillable PDF, that's there too. Both are at bitemepodcast.com. Start tracking, friends. It really changes everything. Welcome, friends, to episode 254. And today I sit down with JJ O'Brien. I'm your host, Margaret, a certified ganjier and TCI certified cannabis educator, and I believe your kitchen is the best dispensary that you'll ever have. Welcome to Bite Me, the show about edibles. Today's guest is someone I've been wanting to talk to for a while. In 2019, JJ O'Brien was given 6 months to a year to live, but she chose a different plan. Now she's a certified medical cannabis educator, executive director of EducANation, and the author of a book that might change how you think about this plant. This is a conversation that I think is going to stick with you. So friends, let's get into this conversation with JJ O'Brien, author of High Hopes for Healing. And I'm really excited today to be joined by JJ O'Brien. And you recently wrote a book. I've known you for a little bit. I think we met first at Camp Canna, of all places. And you recently read a book that I was really interested in for reasons that we'll get into later. But it's called High Hopes for Healing.
Yeah.
Stigma-free education on thriving through cancer with cannabis. And so before we get into this conversation today, JJ, I was just hoping that you could introduce yourself to the listeners of Bite Me and tell us a little bit about your background.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here too and have this conversation with you today. My name is JJ O'Brien, and I currently reside in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada, and I'm a certified medical cannabis educator and the executive director of EducANation, which is a cannabis education nonprofit here in Canada that's dedicated to providing the highest standard of responsible cannabis education. And we are a member-based organization that supports patients and caregivers. And we're also an association of certified cannabis educators, and we support other coaches and educators in the cannabis space. So we're always offering continued education, a newsletter, community forum, lots of activities and things to do. And I got into all of this because I got a cancer diagnosis in November of 2019, and I was offered 6 months to a year to live, which wasn't really a plan that I was okay with. So I went searching for an alternative to that, and I rekindled this relationship with cannabis that I'd had a relationship my whole life with, but I really didn't understand cannabis as a medicine until I found myself in this situation. And trying to navigate all that I was learning, about this plant was really difficult in the beginning. So that's what really got me into learning about cannabis and then becoming certified and then joining EducANation and then eventually writing this book.
That's amazing. So thank you for sharing all of that. And I will be sure to link to a lot of the things you talked about in the show notes so people don't have to worry about writing things down as they listen. But I would imagine getting a cancer diagnosis is super scary for anybody, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on today, because my father was also recently diagnosed with cancer. And when you hear that C word, people, it's really scary. And it also feels like these days, cancer diagnoses are becoming more common, like you just hear about it more. And maybe that's one reason is because detecting it is better, or it's easier to do now than it used to be, which I guess is a good thing. But for yourself, what was the specific moment that you decided cannabis wasn't just helping you survive cancer treatment, but something that you actually needed to write a book about?
Yeah, well, so I first learned about cannabis as a medicine through the documentary Weed the People. And when I saw that documentary, for me, it was light bulbs and fireworks and all of the things. I just knew in that moment, this is for me, this is what I need to be doing. And then I got my hands on some of the medicine and tried my first dose, and it was honestly, after that very first dose, that again, I was like, okay, yes, this is it. And oddly enough, when I took that first dose as well, I took a little bit too much because I thought that, I made the classic rookie mistake because I had so much experience with cannabis and I thought, oh, here we go. I took the medicine, didn't feel anything. And then a couple hours later, took a little bit more of the medicine. And then a few hours later, I felt it, and I felt it a little bit too much. And it was an issue, but I knew I was going to get through it, and I did. But what was so remarkable about this experience for me is that I had so much pain from all the metastasis in my bones. And when I woke up the next morning, I had no more pain. And it was like it had just left, and it felt like it was gone forever. So, and it was gone forever because I've never experienced that level of pain ever again. So after that very first experience with trying it, I was 100% sold. That was it for me. And then it was just through the journey afterwards of trying to learn how to do it properly, how to use it properly, and then how to make it for myself. That's where, I started like hitting so many roadblocks, and, like trying to find information on social media and places like that is really difficult when you're already, going through it with a cancer diagnosis, and there's so much overwhelm in all of this. So essentially, I just wanted to make the journey easier for other people because it was one I had to navigate completely on my own.
Yeah. And that would be also, like you said, that you're probably so overwhelmed with just everything that's going on, and trying to find like relevant factual information in places like social media is, like you said, difficult at the best of times.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned as well that as an experienced cannabis user, you still managed to
make that rookie mistake.
Make the rookie mistake, which is a nice reminder that like these types of things that happen in our lives are an invitation for us to revisit our cannabis use as well. Yep. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Yep. But is there any one thing that you really wish that people knew about using cannabis as a cancer patient?
Well, honestly, I just wish that people would come to it first. I wish it would be considered more of a first line treatment than a kind of last ditch effort, and then I would love for patients to know that they have an endocannabinoid system. And I would love them to know how, balancing that can really support the journey and help their healing, whatever treatment methods they decide and choose to do. But, like you talked about the statistics, and they are getting worse and worse. And it's 1 in 2 men, 1 in 3 women at this point, which is crazy. And those odds are only getting worse. And we're getting to the point where it's a 50-50 shot that everybody's going to have to deal with this at some point in their lives. So this is why it's really, really important for us as well to be informed and to know what our options are, because in my view, what the Western medicine has been doing is not really working, because we're not any better off, like maybe, progression-free survival times, but, we're not eradicating ourselves of this. We're not learning about prevention. I just don't feel like we're going about it the same way after billions and billions of dollars in research. Like, why are we still poisoning people and burning people and, doing all of these things when we know there are so many other benign options up there, less harmful, less, you know what I mean? There's so many, even beyond cannabis.
Right. One thing that you kind of touched on a little bit is with the like dealing with oncologists and doctors and the medical system. And because cannabis is not seen as a first line of treatment when you're dealing with cancer, I would imagine that if you catch it early, like you detect cancer early, that first line cannabis can be incredibly effective, which might mean you don't have to do some of these more invasive treatments. But that probably comes down to stigma. And you mentioned stigma right in the title of your book. And where do you think the most stubborn stigma comes from? Is it from doctors? Is it from partners? Is it, the doctors?
It's definitely doctors where I think, faced it the most. And it's unfortunate because, I've tried to talk to my oncologists about it. I've tried to talk to my doctors about it, and they just kind of ignore me. They just kind of act like it doesn't. It's like Voldemort. It's like the word you do not say, and nobody acknowledges its existence. And that just boggles my mind as well, because I had so much success with this plant before anything else was offered to me by the medical community whatsoever. And if I was a medical professional, I would be absolutely curious and interested to know what this person is doing that is helping to reverse the disease in their body, but they do not. And in the beginning, I went to many of my oncologist appointment with my Dr. Bonnie Goldstein's Cannabis is Medicine book with me, and I would always carry it with the title facing out, and I would, walk through the hospital with it and then put it down on the desk again facing out so that the doctor would see it to try to spark conversation. And it never happened until just recently, actually, where my current oncologist, because I've gone through many over the years, actually asked me for my card because she was asking me about medical cards for patients and things like that. And then I was like, whoa, oh my goodness. I never, ever thought that would happen. So there's hope, I guess. There's hope.
Yeah, I do find things are changing very slowly, though, for sure. But the fact that your oncologist was asking for your card, like maybe that's showing a move of the needle a little bit, but, from when you first got your diagnosis in 2019.
Yes, but I was also very concerned when I asked my oncologist about my endocannabinoid system. And I asked them, what do you know about it? And they said, oh, I've heard of it. And I was very concerned at that point because it's such an important system in our body that controls and regulates, the balance of all the other systems of our body. So I think it's really important that our doctors know about it, especially those ones that are supposedly like have your life in their hands.
And were they pretty receptive to you when you told them that you were using cannabis as a treatment option?
Again, it was just like I was speaking to the wall. I might as well have been speaking to the wall because they were just like, okay. And it wasn't until probably the fourth or fifth time that I mentioned it that it was actually written down in my chart.
Oh, really? Okay. Mm-hmm. Right.
Because I kept mentioning it and kept mentioning because they were just like, oh, yeah, whatever we're doing is working. And I was like, okay.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. I mean, with my dad's experience, they have marked down in his chart that he's using cannabis now, but they haven't really said a whole lot about it. And again, I do get the distinct feeling that if I were to dig deeper, they don't know much about it because they spend so little time on it in medical school,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. And so they don't know about it. So they don't want to have the conversation because they don't want to be made to look stupid because nobody wants to have conversations about things they know nothing about.
Yeah. Yeah. So when my dad was first diagnosed with cancer, one of the first things I did was call you, full disclosure. And after that conversation that I had with you, I put him on a daily regimen of CBN and CBD, which he's been taking consistently. It's been really great. The THC is a little harder to get into him for, obvious reasons. He's in his 90s. He doesn't want to get high. But can you talk a little bit about how supplementing with cannabis can promote wellness, ECS tone, and while undergoing cancer treatment?
Yeah, well, I love that he's at least open to trying what he's been trying, and hopefully it is serving him well. And yeah, I mean, it's great that we have this amazing plant that can help balance our systems. And when somebody's going through cancer, that's so important. Your immune system, basically, your endocannabinoid system is running all through your immune system, and you need your immune system in good shape for when you are, I don't like the word fighting, but when you are, battling this disease, then you need to be in tip-top shape at the end of the day, right? And we've like cannabinoids have been researched for years and years and like decades. And the main study that I know about goes back to 1975, the anti-neoplastic activity of cannabinoids. And they studied CBN, they studied THC, CBD, CBG, and all of these were shown to be anti-cancer by inducing apoptosis. So it was killing cancer cells. So, cannabis kills cancer cells, and then it can help keep new cancer cells from forming, which is always the constant battle, right? That cancer patients have. We don't want it to spread. When it spreads, it gets more difficult to treat. So this is another, area where cannabis has so much benefit. And then if you are going through the treatments, chemotherapy or radiation or immunotherapy, any of these things, they're taking a toll on the body as well. So cannabis can support you through that, can help reduce the burden of a lot of the side effects that come with, and actually help the medicine work better because your body is in the best shape that it can be, to go through it. So, it's so supportive. I do wish more doctors would at least look at it as adjunct to,
Yes.
what they are doing.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I also feel like if I was to go to my dad and say, don't do any treatment, he would probably feel, a certain type of way about that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you mention all the ways that cannabis can support the treatment that he's doing and the ongoing effects of, battling, we don't want to use that word necessarily, but like ceasing the spread of more cancer, because once you have it, then there is always that possibility, I guess. But like all the things you just mentioned are great reasons to supplement with cannabis while you're undergoing cancer treatment.
Yeah.
And
it's the only, our bodies are hardwired for cannabis. It's the only plant on the planet that our bodies are hardwired for, right? So, it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I am very grateful that my dad is open to consuming it. It's really kind of nice to see because, every day he's just getting out his tincture and he's taking it, no questions asked, really. Like it's just become part of his daily routine, which I love. And growing up, he's pretty anti-cannabis. So he's come full circle now, but
that's amazing.
Which, you can change people's minds at any time in their life as well.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was in your book, you talk a lot about the benefits of acidic cannabinoids for cancer prevention, treatment, and general well-being. And I don't feel like enough people talk about acidic cannabinoids. And I do have like a lot of those pages sort of like bookmarked because I thought it was so interesting. Can you talk a bit about that? About acidic cannabinoids?
Well, I'm with you there 100%. Like, I don't think we're talking enough about acidics, about the raw cannabis plant. Like the plant in its natural essence has all these beautiful acidic cannabinoids. And they have a lot of benefit as well. We know like CBDA, the acidic version of CBD is like 100 times more potent pain reliever than aspirin. A THCA, potent anti-inflammatory, more so than THC. And I learned from some of my colleagues from the Cannabis Coaching Institute, now the Cannabis Institute, about blending like multi-cannabinoid blends. And they shout out to my friend Michelle Crawford, who came up with the trifecta blend, which is the six sisters, we call it, of THC, THCA, CBD, CBDA, CBG, CBGA. And this blend, we all started formulating it and we all started consuming and we all started seeing amazing benefit from it. And her family was seeing benefit from it. And everybody that she was sharing this medicine with was benefiting from it. And we were just like, wow. And like eating, juicing, sprouting, whatever you can. There is a lot of benefit to it. And like I said, we do not know nearly enough yet. I do think and hope there will be more about this in the future, especially from actually some of our one of our EducANation members, who is somebody that you should maybe interview if you haven't already. I think Cheryl and Haley, their story is remarkable, and how beneficial raw cannabis has been to Haley's treatment of her particular condition. So Cheryl Rose, Haley Rose, check them out. Amazing story about the benefits of raw cannabis. And even I don't know as much as I probably should about them yet, because, the research isn't really there at this time. But like, I think we're going to change, how we, utilize this medicine in the future, I think in a big way, once this information, it does come to light.
Yeah, because I think it's also so interesting because there is still that stigma around cannabis use, but suddenly you're introducing this concept of, for those who don't understand what an acidic cannabinoid is, it's just a cannabinoid that hasn't been decarboxylated. So you haven't applied heat to it. So when you're making edibles, you decarb it in the oven first, or when you smoke, you apply fire to the joint and light it up. So because of that, there's not the intoxicating properties. Whether if it's THCA, you're not getting intoxicated, which does make cannabis seem a little less intimidating to folks who are unfamiliar with it already. So I think that's such an interesting part of research that I would love to see more of, because so many people would be way more willing to like try THCA.
Absolutely.
Because they're like a little intimidated about getting high. Yeah. And I mean, you have in the book here, THCA being like non-inflammatory, anti-nausea, anti-spasmodic, neuroprotective, appetite stimulant, adaptogenic, analgesic. Like that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is just the raw plant. Like this is just taking a nug, making a tea, or sprinkling some of it on your food, like on your salad, or sauteing the leaves or juicing the leaves. I love juicing the leaves. Like when I go out, when I'm growing every summer, every morning, I'm out in my garden, I'm, de-leafing, and I pull a couple weeds from my garden, and then they go in the juicer. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And like, it's good medicine.
Yeah. Now, for somebody who's listening to this and they don't have anybody in their life that is managing cancer, it's not something they've experienced themselves. Have you ever, how do you recommend people start with something like a THCA or CBDA? Like just make tea? Could you infuse it into?
Yeah, you absolutely can. There's a great video on YouTube too by Reveal Cannabis about making cannabis tea from one of our EducANation members, Tamara Wilton. Great video. But yeah, cannabis tea. Yes, absolutely. Super great, easy method for just utilizing the raw cannabis and getting those benefits. And you get about 5 to 10 milligrams of the THCA or CBDA, depending on what you're using when you make that tea. So you're getting, the benefit from that.
I'm somebody who loves to infuse. And I've always wondered, I tried it once before and I used up the oil, but obviously it doesn't get you high. And this is long before, I knew about you or read your book or my dad's own diagnosis, but the idea of infusing raw flower into an oil sounds actually quite nice, because I wonder if it would also preserve a lot of the terpenes as well. So you can use it as, part of your daily regimen.
Yes, you have to. Yeah. You have to dry it though, because I have tried doing a raw leaf infusion before, and it was just a slimy, moldy mess. It was not pretty.
Okay, right. Yeah. Okay, duly noted. Be sure that it is raw, but dried and cured.
Dried. Yeah, not too
just
much
not decarbed
content. And I love sauteing them like kale, sauteed the leaves. They got a nice spicy kind of peppery flavor that from the beta caryophyllene and things like that.
Yeah.
It's very good. Very good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I encountered, and you talk a bit about that in the book as well, is that there are people who want to get THC into their systems, but they don't necessarily want to get high, like in the case of my father.
Yeah.
And so this is where suppositories come in.
Yeah.
And can you talk a bit about why they're so effective? Because before I had that conversation with you, I didn't know what I now know about suppositories. And I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 100% of the people that I work with utilize suppositories, because most of the people that come to me, they've just been handed a cancer diagnosis and they're like, what, cannabis? Oh, and they just hear about it, but they've probably never had any experience with it before. Like many people haven't had experience it with before, or, smoked that joint in high school and didn't really care for it and just moved on from there. Most people have lives, they have families, they have jobs, they have, responsibilities from day to day. So they don't want to have to be spending 3 months or whatever length of time in a treatment phase with cannabis and feeling, a little euphoric. So most people do suppositories, and this is because it bypasses the, processing through the liver, that first pass metabolism, and it doesn't get converted to that 11-hydroxy THC, which is much more potent than THC. So, that's why edibles last longer and hit harder. And and you don't get that euphoric feeling. So it just goes either rectally or vaginally, and it bypasses that liver and just goes and still crosses the blood-brain barrier. So you're still getting all those incredible systemic effects. So most people, like I said, that I work with are doing that. Now, I have had the rarest of people who do end up feeling a little bit of euphoria or effects from the suppository dosing. So we still start low and go slow with them still, even though you're not supposed to feel the euphoric effects. Some people do, people who are usually really, really sensitive to medications in general, people who are like really sensitive systems, or sometimes there's blood or things happening in the areas that can travel a little bit of, active cannabinoids to certain areas that you don't really want. Or at least causing effects that you don't really want. But there's a lot of ways to mitigate that as well. But in general, for the most part, most people don't feel anything but better when utilizing suppositories.
Yeah. And I don't think I realized either. I just learned this right now is that if you use the suppositories vaginally, that you also don't get high. And I guess that's because when we were talking about it, obviously we were talking about my father. So we were talking about a certain method of application, which would apply to him. But I think that's what makes them so interesting is that you can get your THC, not get intoxicated, but you could also potentially take a higher amount than you could if you were eating it or smoking it. Because I'm pretty, I have a low to moderate dose that I could take if I'm eating or smoking. But if I take it as a suppository, I could probably also get more cannabinoids in me than I would be able to otherwise.
Yeah,
which is really interesting.
For sure, because it's much more bioavailable that way as well. When you're utilizing cannabis via suppositories, you're getting like 60 to 80% bioavailability compared to if you're ingesting, it's 20 to 40. If you're smoking, it's like 10 to 20. And so you can start at higher doses. Like our starting dose for suppositories is 50 milligrams, but most people wouldn't be able to start at a 50 milligram edible. That's going to be way too much. But just because of the way it does get processed through the system, then you can do it that way.
Yeah. And interestingly, too, of course, for those listening, that you can make your own suppositories as well, which I think is incredible. And you talk about that in your book, too. Yeah. So that's another way that, this medicine becomes more accessible to people, because when you can do it at home and you don't have to rely on going to the store to buy it, because that can get incredibly expensive very quickly. Yeah.
And if you are a cancer patient who wants to utilize suppositories to do like a treatment phase, you're not going to find that in the store. You're not going to get it at the dosages that you need. So you are going to need to learn how to make them for yourself. And I'm here to tell you, it's really, really easy. And there are so many great people around that are great resources that can show you. But literally, if you can melt something, if you can simmer, if you can make a cup of tea, then you can make cannabis medicine very easily, and you can make a suppository, no problem.
Yeah. And when I made it too, based on your guidance, I used an RSO or a FICO.
Nice.
And that makes it even easier, I will say. It is 100%. Super simple. The hardest part is just
cacao butter, 2 ingredients, melt, mold, here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I love that, because I always just feel like anytime we can take control over anything in our life like that, it can feel really empowering, especially if you're dealing with, a diagnosis of some kind. Because I also would imagine that using suppositories is a great way to get your cannabinoids if you're dealing with other things.
Well, yeah. And it's great for like targeting specific areas as well, like gynecological cancers and rectal cancers and things like that. You're going up from those area or regions, you're hitting, directly the areas that need to be hit. Same thing with the lung, because when you are going up through the rectum, you're running along a meridian that runs up your lung and all up here and up into your brain. So it's actually great for lung cancers as well, and for anything that metastasizes to the brain, like lung cancer often does. So it is a great method of intake for many different cancers, not just for, targeting in those specific regions, but if you're getting something up towards lung or brain, then going that route is great as well. And that higher bioavailability bioavailability, you're getting more bang for your buck as well, right? So why not?
Yeah. No, it's honestly, the more you explore the connection between cannabis and our bodies, it's to me really incredible because,
Mhm.
you could use a suppository vaginally and get all of these benefits from it.
Mhm.
And then you could also use a lube and it still doesn't get you high, but it does definitely have a physical effect. And I just
Mhm.
find all that stuff super interesting that this
Absolutely.
one plant has so many pathways
So
to providing for us. So
many,
yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
Now,
beautiful.
how do you approach dosing? Like, how did you figure out what actually worked for you? Because I imagine when people are first starting out on this path, they're like, where do I even start? I mean, obviously, if they're working with somebody like you, they have a leg up or an advantage, or if they buy your book, you have specific guidance. But
Yeah.
like, how did you figure it out for yourself?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I watched the Rick Simpson's documentary when I heard about Rick Simpson oil and I started researching Rick Simpson and all of the things and found out his protocol, which was, the 60 grams in 90 days protocol, which is what most people are still generally navigating towards still today. It's a guideline, not the rule. But so I remember hearing Rick say, get your oil, take a dose. If it gets you high, it's going to work. And so that was the guideline that I initially went off of. And so we all know that I did get very high off off my first dose. So I was like, okay, this is going to work. But so that's why we always tell people, start low and go slow. It is the golden rule of cannabis dosing because there really is no regulation. There's no way to regulate it. So we just start low and go slow, and we work our way up to high doses, and which is opposite of what most people do with all the other conditions that aren't cancer. Is you want to find your minimum effective dose, right? You want to use the smallest amount of medicine to support your needs. But when it comes to cancer, like we're attacking, this is aggressive. So we need to take as much of this medicine as we can and get as much into us as safely and as timely as possible. So our dosing regimen is a little bit more like what Dr. Sulak says, start low and go slow, but don't be afraid to go all the way. I do love a kitchen sink approach as well, where it's just like, get as much into you as you can, as many different cannabinoids, as many different compounds from the plant into as many different holes in your body as possible.
Right.
And it's the
I love
kitchen
that.
sink. Just throw it all at it. There's no amount that's too much. Don't think you're
Right.
going to blow out your endocannabinoid system or anything like that. It's all temporary, and you're on a mission here. So just complete the mission, and then we'll go from there.
That's interesting that you mentioned about blowing out the ECS, because obviously when people are talking about, as you already mentioned, the minimum effective dose,
Mm-hmm.
and that is, wise advice because we're trying to avoid cannabis use disorder or hyperemesis, which I know is still
Spending
pretty
piles of money.
rare,
Mm-hmm.
and spending
Yeah.
piles of money. So this advice is sort of the opposite. Does your ECS sort of, when you have a diagnosis like cancer, does it sort of respond differently, I guess, to cannabis because you are trying to take in so much THC or other cannabinoids?
I mean, I don't know the definitive answer to that, but I would say, yeah, for sure, right? Like your body is responding in the way that it needs, and your body in that time needs more medicine at that time because there's a little bit more that is going on. So, and your body is going to guide you, and it is going to let you know how much is too much. Like when I took my first dose and my body told me that was too much, but you keep going and you build tolerance. That's what the low and slow approach is for, so that you can build more tolerance to the side effects of the medicine. But that doesn't mean the medicine's not working. It is still working, and it's still doing its thing inside of you. And in the beginning, I was worried that I was going to take too much cannabis, and I was going to, like I said, blow out my endocannabinoid system, and it was all going to be too much. But then I heard about others who take way more, up to 40 grams a day of cannabinoids. Wow. Yeah, 40,000 milligrams, 40 grams a day of other people who have overcome cancer. And so when I was taking a gram a day, I was worried. And then when I heard about the 40, I was like, okay, I'm good. And I've had some ups and downs over my cancer journey where I had an NED. I was told I had no evidence of disease. I got the all clear, and then I went, yay, and I went about my life and gave up all of my treatment. And then I had a recurrence of 11 tumors in my brain, and then another recurrence later of 8 tumors in my brain. But I constantly went back to the cannabis for that. And when I had the 11 tumors, like, I wasn't messing around. So I started at 1 gram and went up to 3 or 4 for a few weeks in the beginning, just because I was like, yeah, this has got to go. And I did wipe them out in 2 months.
Right. Wow. That's incredible. And like you said, this isn't something that you're doing forever. This is obviously like a short-term duration that you're consuming.
The high doses are not forever, but maintenance dosing is very, very important when you are somebody who has dealt with cancer. And if you overcome with the use of this medicine, it is very important that you continue on with it. This is what worked for you. And so you got to stay on it, but you don't have to stay on the crazy high doses. You just need to stay with a maintenance dose. Rick recommended like 1 to 3 grams a month. I do 1 gram a day. I don't mess around because of my history and what I have gone through. 1 gram a day feels right for me. And I think everybody's maintenance dose is different, should be different. And it should be based on them, how they feel, what condition they have dealt with, what treatments their body has endured previously. And I think all of those factors should kind of be evaluated when deciding what a maintenance dose should be.
Yeah,
but there should be a maintenance dose. And it doesn't have to involve THC necessarily, maybe a little bit, but having other cannabinoids too, because my gram a day is not all THC. There's CBG, CBGA, CBD. I'm mixing because I know the benefit, and I'm just trying to maintain a threshold. From the research that I've done and from what I've seen, I think that the minimum threshold should be 200 milligrams roughly a day. Well, at least for me, 200 milligrams a day, 200 milligrams for treatment, and then you can maintenance from there.
Right. And all that makes total sense, because anybody who's dealt with cannabis for any length of time knows that it's all very personalized and individual, whether you're using it to treat cancer or whether you're just using it for stress relief or whatever your condition might be. So that all makes complete sense. Now, a lot of people who will be listening aren't patients, but they might be somebody who's supporting a patient or they're a caregiver. What do caregivers need to understand about all of this that they usually don't?
Well, when it comes to the person that they are giving care for, I would say just understand that it's their journey, it's their life, and you, of course, are going to have your feelings and opinions and wanting to do everything you can to save the person's life or do whatever you can for them. But at the end of the day, you can't force anybody to do anything. Everybody is on their own journey, and we all have a path. We're all here to do our thing. We're all doing our thing. And maybe they're just doing their thing. You don't know. And also, don't forget about cannabis for yourself, because your health is just as important as a caregiver. If you're looking after somebody, you need to look after yourself as well. So don't forget about, maintaining the balance of your own endocannabinoid system, because it will support you well.
Yeah. And that's great advice too, because people often forget like how challenging it can be to be the friend or caregiver for somebody who's going through something so difficult. And, always, if you're not looking after yourself, it's a lot more difficult to look after other people. So I love that. Don't forget about yourself.
Yes.
Now, do you have any stories that highlight how cannabis and cancer can work together for the best patient outcomes?
I have so many stories. I don't even know which one.
Just
everybody that I know that has accepted this plant and worked with it in some way has benefited in some way. I'm not saying everybody's lives have been saved and it's a miracle, but I mean, they've benefited. My father-in-law, and it's one of my favorite stories, even though he still passed away. He was given 9 months to live and he passed away 11 months later. He did try to do chemo, but it was way too hard on him and he had to stop. He almost didn't make it through that. But he did do the cannabis all the way through, and he was utilizing the suppositories. And I had a previous experience with losing my mom to cancer, and it was completely opposite to what I had gone through with my father-in-law, which was great because I had the information that I didn't have when my mom passed away. So because he was able to utilize the medicine, he lived that 11 months in no pain, in a great mood, able to
Right.
talk and be like, a part of our lives. And like when my mom got sick, she was given so many drugs that she was gone before she was gone. Like,
Right.
it was awful that she was there and you're just, watching the chest every breath, just wait to see which one was going to be the last. It was, terrible. And I think that experience was a big part of what, drove me in my own situation to be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I can't do this. We're going to do something else. And, and off I went with my alternatives. But, with my father-in-law, just the fact that he was there with us the whole time until the very end, like until the last couple of hours. And it wasn't until then. And the doctors couldn't believe that he didn't have any pain. They kept like,
Right.
what? You're not in pain? Like you
That's
don't
it.
have
That's
any pain?
honestly an
And
incredible
he was like,
story.
no, like no
Yeah.
pain. And they were like, okay. And so they were really shocked by that. So he thanked me for it every time that I saw him. And when we would kiss, hug goodbye or whatever, he would always whisper in my ear, thank you. I know it's helping. I know it's helping.
Right. And
And
that's
that
no
was
small
beautiful.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're
Mhm.
dealing with something so difficult but you're able to deal with it pain-free or like
Yes,
mitigating all the horrible symptoms that can come along with it, like that is so
absolutely.
valuable. So,
Absolutely. So that really meant a lot to me. And, I'm still new in this whole, game of cancer healing and all of this and working with other people and helping guide them and educate them. But like everybody that I've worked with is still here. I mean, there have been one or two that we've lost, but for the most part, everybody's still here. And sadly, like those people were the people that came to me as a last ditch effort after everything was done. And,
right.
it was like, we tried, we did everything we could, but it was just like, sometimes it is just too late, or sometimes it's just a person's time. And,
Yeah.
this is life. Again, we all have to go at some time. Nobody's getting out of here alive. So, we're just trying to make it the easiest and most peaceful, situation that it can be for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. But the one thing I do think we need to touch on, of course, is that you and I are talking from Ontario, Canada,
Mhm.
and we have federal legalization here, which
Mhm.
I'm very grateful for. So access for us is obviously mostly uncomplicated, but for people who don't have access or it's limited, how do you counsel somebody in those kinds of situations?
Yeah, well, I mean, even with legalization here in Canada, cancer patients, a lot of people like me are still kind of left in the dust because we can't really access the medicine that we need on the legal market. So,
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, we got to do what we got to do. So I just say it's your life, and where there's a will, there's a way. And there are like loopholes in our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and in our Canadian Criminal Code that do protect us as patients. Like, no, there's not the RCMP or, the OPP. They aren't out here, arresting cancer patients who are trying to access a high, dose cannabis oil so they can treat themselves. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be an issue, but it is outside of the gray areas of the law. But at the end of the day, they're not really enforcing that law. So I just kind of let people know that, hey, it's your life. You need to do what you need to do. We're not like out here doing anything horrific and hurting people. We're just using a plant to save our lives. So it's okay. Take a deep breath. There are lots of places to access. There are a lot of compassionate people out there that are willing to support you, who make medicine to support patients because it is not available from the powers that be. So I mean, it's a little bit of a different world when it comes to dealing with cancer because we do have to work a little bit more outside of the law because the law is not supporting us.
Right. Yeah. It's always tricky.
It is.
And the places where like you have no legalization at all as well, like do you find that people have more trouble finding reputable sources to
No,
get their
because I
FICO
mean, in
from?
the US is where there's a lot of places that, where it's still illegal or not
Hmm.
medical or whatever. And there are way more people in the US that you can get access from than you can here in Canada,
Oh,
where
wow.
it's fully
Okay.
federally legal.
Right. That's very interesting, actually.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm disappointed to hear that, but also not surprised, maybe. So,
Well, larger population, more
yeah.
people, and it's been more of an issue there because there it is not federally legal. So
Hmm.
more people have been, skirting the law because, they're doing what they have to do to support people who need this medicine.
Yeah. And I, like you said too, I do get the feeling that here in Canada, even though, buying FICO online isn't necessarily, it's sort of like a gray area, but I don't
Yes.
think the authorities give a shit.
They're
I
not
think
shutting
that,
down these sites left, right, and center. I mean,
yeah.
they are, hurting the compassion clubs and
Hmm.
the sovereign market right now in a big way. And that is affecting patients, but they're not hitting us directly.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they back off on some of those areas and
Yes, I
let people
hope
do what they
so.
need to do. Because honestly, at the end of the day, there's far worse things that they should be dealing with, as we all know. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess just a couple more questions before we finish
Yeah.
off for today. But if you could change one thing about the medical establishment and how it approaches the conversation about cannabis, what would it be?
Uh, Well, just to be able to have the conversation would be great. And
Right.
for them to be educated about their endocannabinoid system so that they can educate other people about their very important system. So, yeah, really at the end of the day, they have to be open to have the conversation. And that means having a little bit of education. I understand doctors have to fill their brains with so much information. There's so many different ailments and so many different drugs out there. But cannabis is an option that a lot of people are moving towards. And so you got to at least have a little bit of information. Or if you don't have the information, know who you can send them to get the information from. Like,
Right.
come, say, well, I don't know, but go talk to somebody at EducANation and they can help you. Like, we have to work together here. We cannot leave people in the dust. We cannot keep ignoring people and acting like what the words that they are saying don't exist. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to keep going into my oncology ward and feeling ignored. Like, it's really not a supportive process for my
Right.
healing.
Yeah. Now, do you think that it's changing at all? And the only reason I ask this is because, like, my dad's been dealing with oncologists, of course, who have been practicing for a while. Let's just
Mhm.
say they're not
Yeah.
new to the practice. And then he has a new GP that took over. A GP retired and another one took
Okay.
over. And this GP is younger and also way more open minded about
Okay.
like cannabis and having conversations about them. So I'm just curious if you think I don't know anything about what's going on in medical schools, but like, do you think it's
Yeah.
changing at all? Like, are they introducing the concept of ECS and
Well,
cannabis more?
I know there are a lot of organizations that are trying to, fight to have this taught more in medical school. I know the numbers are still very low, like around 7% or something like that of schools mention the endocannabinoid system or anything like
Wow.
that. And oddly enough, in my experience, it's been the older doctors who are just like,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, we know, and we're close to retirement, so we don't care anymore. So we will
Right.
talk to you about cannabis. But great to see, yeah, if there's younger doctors that are coming in and are more informed because it is legal now here in Canada. So, more people are likely to access it. Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting. It would be interesting for sure. But
I guess that
yeah,
sort of like kills my theory in a way when you said you found more oncologists are more open-minded about it. And I'm like, maybe because
like
they're old, they're not open-minded,
the
but yeah.
older ones, but not so much like. And oncology, well, like I said, I've had several different oncologists, and yeah, most of them just are like, nope, we're not even talking about that whatsoever. But it has to change. I mean, could more and more patients are becoming aware. More and more patients are asking questions. So at some point, I mean,
it becomes impossible to ignore, right? Like if you keep having patient after patient coming in being like, I want to start with cannabis right from the outset and see where that takes us, whether they're supplementing or, whatever the case is for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have a bunch of books up here. They're all written by doctors. Like, just go pick up a book. And like, I have 2 copies of Cannabis is Medicine by Dr. Goldstein, because I'm like, I'm going to give one to one of these doctors.
Right.
And hope that they read it and learn something from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be nice to see. That would change the game for sure. But I guess it just takes time and more patients coming in and advocating for themselves. Because at the end of the day, that's what you have to do, right?
Yes. Yeah. So in the meantime, that's why EducANation exists. That's why I exist, because, doctors are kind of dropping the ball on this right now. So we're here to support you. We're here to support each other on this journey. And, we're just patients helping patients. We're not medical professionals or, anything like that. I got letters after my name, but they're not MD or RN. I'm just, I'm just a regular person. And I just had to navigate a really tricky situation. And it took a lot of digging and, deep dives and things like that. So I'm just, again, like I said, just trying to share what I learned and make the journey easier for somebody else.
Yeah. Well, that's such a wonderful way to give back to the community too. So thank you for that. And because you have been so involved in doing research for yourself and then later for your book and your work with EducANation, is there anything that's come across your radar as far as research goes when it comes to cannabis and cancer that you're particularly excited about?
Well, maybe not particularly cannabis and cancer, but there's a lot of studies coming out these days. I'm glad they're still coming out pro anti-cancer cannabis. Yay. Mm-hmm. They're really showing like against ovarian, colon, like great studies coming out with that as well. But the latest thing that actually has just blown my mind is the flavoalkaloids. Have you heard about these flavoalkaloids that they found in the cannabis leaf?
Yes. And I was thinking about trying to remember what the name of it was when you were talking about juicing leaves. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. So the flavoalkaloids are in those leaves because they just developed some new microscope that could look deeper into them. Just the fact that we are still discovering components in this plant after 12,000 years of recorded use on this planet. We still don't know everything. I know when I first started studying cannabis, we said there were 500 compounds in the cannabis plant. Now there's 750 that we know about. Like, it's just, it's mind boggling. We're still learning about this plant. We're still learning about ourselves, but these flavoalkaloids, I think are very interesting. And with the cannaflavin A and B and C. So I'm interested to see what will come of that. And I think that they would have some anti-cancer benefit as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's like a brand new study that's pretty much come out.
September last year it came out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's really interesting stuff. And it does also give you another reason to juice your cannabis leaves as well. Yeah. And just to add on to the cannabis leaf thing, like if you are growing and you have cannabis leaves and you can't necessarily, like if you're pulling down a plant for harvest or whatever, can you freeze these leaves? How can you store them? Because you don't necessarily want to make all the tea with all the leaves.
I juice them and I freeze them into ice cubes. I freeze the juice into ice cubes. And then I throw that in my smoothies or something like that as well. So I've never tried like just freezing the leaves straight, because I know
your method's better, honestly.
You can freeze kale, but juice them and then just freeze it in the ice cube trays and then you're good to go. So you can even, like, if you have a male, you need to call a male, then don't throw it in the garbage, don't burn it, don't set it on fire, just juice it. It's got so much benefit in there in that plant. There's a lot of great medicine. So just juice it and drink it up.
I do like the idea too of just processing it all at once and then freezing it. I don't know why I think of that in the moment, and I don't know if you've heard that there is apparently a high amount of CBN in the root ball, and people are using the root ball to make infusions as well.
Yes.
So it just goes to show that like the cannabis plant can be used from root to tip. And
100%.
Amazing, 100%. Right?
Yes. It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So finally, JJ, what are you hoping that readers take away from your book or from this conversation?
Well, I hope they enjoyed the conversation. And from the book, of course, it's about hope, and it's about education, and it's about inspiration and empowerment, really, at the end of the day. So I hope that, people will feel a little less daunted about cannabis after reading it, and feel at least that they can make an informed decision after reading it. And it's a quick read, so
yeah. And honestly, it's a great book. And I think
Thank
anybody
you.
should pick it up if this is something that they're interested in, or they're caregiving, or they're, have had a recent diagnosis themselves. It can really dispel some myths, break some of that stigma. You've got so much research and recipes in it as well. So yeah. So thank you so much, JJ, for your time today. And I think the people listening will get something from this conversation. And thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
And that's it for this week, my friends. I appreciate you spending this time with me and with JJ. And if there's something in today's conversation that hit close to home, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. That's how this community grows. And you can find all the details on where to connect with JJ in the show notes. And if you're ready to take more control of your own healing and your own kitchen, find me at bitemepodcast.com. Your kitchen is the best dispensary that you'll ever have. Until next time, friends, I'm your host, Margaret. Stay curious and stay high. Hey friends, I've been making edibles for over 10 years now, and I still get questions I've never heard before. And that's what I love about this community and doing this show. You keep me on my toes, really. So here's what's happening. In a couple months, I'm doing a listener Q&A episode, and I want your questions. I haven't done a Q&A in about 3 years. The weird ones, the basic ones, the ones you've been too embarrassed to ask, the ones you've Googled 3 times and you still don't really have a clear answer. All of it is fair game. Maybe you've been trying to nail your dosing and it's just not clicking. Maybe you've got a batch that went sideways and you want to know why. Maybe you're just curious about something you've heard on the show and you want to go deeper. Maybe you're curious about Bite Me itself. Ask me. You can send a voice message if you want to hear your own voice on the show, or just drop your question in writing. Either way works. The link to submit is in the show notes, and I appreciate you for listening and for being a part of this community, and I really appreciate you trusting me with your questions. Stay curious and stay high, friends. Now let's get into today's episode.